The stadium does not erupt immediately. It breathes. Floodlights hover above the pitch like artificial moons, flattening the grass into a perfect grid. Every line feels intentional, every shadow measured. The crowd hums, not with chaos, but with anticipation shaped by expectation. Something precise is about to happen. On the touchline stands Pep Guardiola, still focused, restless in silence. His eyes do not chase the ball, but follow the empty spaces it leaves behind. He studies angles, distances, movements without possession. For Guardiola, football exists not only in motion, but in structure. Possession is protection. Structure is security. Control is belief. Yet as the game prepares to unfold, a question lingers beneath the noise. What happens when control stops being a tool and becomes an obsession? Guardiola's philosophy was not invented overnight. It was inherited, studied, and refined. At La Masia, football was taught as a language. Passing was grammar. Movement was meaning. Understanding space was intelligence. Under Johan Cruyff, Guardiola learned that domination did not begin with goals, but with the ball. If you controlled possession, you controlled time. If you controlled time, you controlled fear. Barcelona became the perfect environment for this idea to grow, not just as a tactic, but as an identity. Winning was important, but how you won mattered just as much. When Guardiola took charge of Barcelona in 2008, his vision found its stage. The team did not simply compete. It dictated. Matches were no longer battles of strength, but exercises in control. Football began to look different. At Barcelona, control became art. Xavi dictated rhythm with surgical precision. Iniesta moved through spaces that seemed to close behind him. Messi, liberated by structure, transcended position and definition. Opponents chased shadows while the ball moved faster than pressure could follow. Success followed Guardiola beyond Spain. In Munich, he inherited a team already crowned champions of Europe. But preservation was never his nature. Fullbacks moved into midfield. Centre-backs became playmakers. Systems evolved weekly, sometimes nightly. Bayern dominated possession with ruthless consistency. At Manchester City, Guardiola found his most expansive canvas. Records fell. Points totals soared. Domestic dominance became routine. City did not overwhelm opponents with chaos, but with compression. Space was denied. Mistakes were forced. Control felt absolute. But Europe resisted. The Champions League demanded something control could not always provide. In key moments, Guardiola chose complexity over simplicity. Tactical surprises appeared when familiarity was needed. Structures shifted under pressure. Players hesitated. The ball slowed. Control, once a source of confidence, became a burden. Nights in Rome, Lyon, and Madrid followed a familiar script. The system tightened as fear crept in. Guardiola watched as the game escaped his design. Football reminded him of its oldest truth. Structure can guide, but it cannot guarantee. Control can reduce chaos, but it cannot eliminate it. Then came Istanbul, a final not shaped by dominance, but by endurance. This time, Guardiola trusted what he had built instead of reinventing it. Manchester City did not chase perfection. They survived discomfort. The goal did not explode into chaos. It arrived calmly, heavily, decisively. When the final whistle sounded, it felt less like triumph and more like release. Guardiola fell to his knees, not as a mastermind celebrating brilliance, but as a man who had finally allowed the game to breathe. Control remained, but it no longer suffocated. Guardiola's story is not one of overthinking alone. It is the story of someone who cares too deeply. His obsession elevated football to intellectual heights rarely seen. It also exposed him to heartbreak more often than most. He does not fail because his ideas are wrong. He fails because football resists absolutes. The game punishes certainty and rewards adaptation. Without Guardiola's obsession, modern football would be poorer, simpler, less brave. His defeats matter because his vision matters. As the stadium empties and the lights dim, the lines on the pitch begin to fade. The white markings that once enforced discipline lose their authority, slowly dissolving into grass and shadow. Systems unravel. Formations disappear. The carefully arranged distances, the rehearsed movements, the rigid spacing that once gave shape to the game, all begin to loosen their grip. What remains is not control, but memory. The memory of moments that escaped structure. A run made on instinct. A pass played against instruction. A decision taken in a fraction of a second that no diagram could fully predict. When the noise fades, football is remembered not as a system executed, but as a series of choices felt. Guardiola will continue to search for balance between order and freedom, because that tension is the engine of his footballing philosophy. He will refine structures, perfect automatisms, and demand clarity in chaos. Yet football will continue to disrupt that search, as it always has. A deflection will rewrite the plan. A player will see space where none was designed. Emotion, fatigue, fear, and courage will interfere with logic. Somewhere between obsession and release, the game finds its meaning. Not in total control, and not in pure improvisation, but in the fragile space where preparation meets unpredictability, where structure exists only to be challenged. Because football is not just about control, it is about knowing when to let go. About understanding when the framework has done enough, and the moment belongs to the player rather than the plan. The game reveals its deepest truth, not when everything goes as designed, but when order steps aside and allows something human to emerge. In that surrender, football becomes more than a system. It becomes a story.